It's nice to know that they're listening, right? The next speaker is Assemblymember Jacqui Irwin. She represents the 44th District. She's the chair of the Select Committee on Cybersecurity. She's the chair for the Committee on Veterans Affairs. She's a member of the Committee on Budget, and she's a member of the Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy. Primary jurisdictions are business advocacy within the California and the United States Business Advocacy and Import-Export Trade, California-Mexico Relations, California Overseas Trade Offices, Department of Information Technology, Development and Expansion of New Technologies except Energy, Development of International High-Tech Markets, Economic Disaster Relief, Economic Impact Reports, Effect of Balance and Trade Issues on California, Enterprise Zones, Expansion of Overseas Markets, Foreign Investments by California, Foreign Investments in California, Impacts of Federal Budget on High-Tech Projects, Impacts of Federal Budget on International Trade, Information Technology, Industrial Innovation and Research, International Capital, including capital formation, International Trade, Research, Import, Export, Finance, Interstate Commerce, Seaports and Physical Infrastructure, Sister State Agreements and Friendship Agreements with other nations, Small Business Development and Operations, State, Local Economic Development, and Women and Minority Business Enterprises. In addition, she's joined by Suzanne Schlendorf, the Chief of Staff. So, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Assemblymember Jacqui Irwin.
Boy, I had no idea I was doing that much work. Good afternoon, everybody, and I want to start by thanking you for the opportunity to allow me to address you. Just as Assemblymember Chow, I come from a technical background. My degree is in systems engineering. My first job was at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins University, and then I worked at Teledyne Systems Company. It's so encouraging to see cybersecurity finally receiving the attention that it deserves, and to have the public and private sectors working together to meet this challenge. Along with Assemblymember Chow, I've spent much of my first term in the legislature working on cybersecurity, and the main lesson I've learned is that better security starts with building awareness to the public as to why they should care about this issue. Among so many experts in this field with operational and technical expertise, I will focus my remarks on what I believe to be the proper role of the legislature, some of the policy and oversight work we have done, and my experience talking cybersecurity with constituents. It's worth noting that cybersecurity was a central part of Monday's presidential debate. As the public becomes more interested and knowledgeable about the issues of privacy, network security, and threats to critical infrastructure, we need to improve our means of communicating this complex issue. My main concern involves the potential impacts on public safety. No public or private operation is immune, and it's no surprise that the state controls much of our private information and critical services, healthcare and medical records, financial records and tax filing, our courts, our election systems, and the electrical grids. And as we continue to deploy SCADA in much of our critical infrastructure, access to drinking water or emergency communications, airport, and port logistics are all in the state's domain. When I served on the City Council of Thousand Oaks, it was considered one of the safest cities in the country, and it went without saying that threats to public safety were taken very seriously. If cyber attacks were more visible and more immediately felt by the public, such as an attack on a school or a hospital, it's safe to say that the political response and public involvement would be much more vigorous. Yet thousands of cyber attacks, most of them unsuccessful, happen every day. California holds a tremendous amount of sensitive information that makes it a priority target for hackers. To some, this is a crisis. To others, it's simply the cost of doing business. For law enforcement, this is the new normal as more criminal activity is moving online. The impact it has on our economy, our public safety, and even our national security is growing every day. In talking to people in my community and across California, it is clear that the security instincts we all have, like locking our front doors when we leave, have not carried on to our online lives. Most of the public is vulnerable in areas that they do not yet understand, and it's important to make people aware of the choices that they are making or ignoring when it comes to technology around them. We would benefit from better awareness and a greater sense of urgency. And in new ways, we are each responsible for learning how we can protect data from being breached or compromised. As most of you know, the vast majority of breaches are from human error. Public awareness campaigns and mandatory security training of state employees are some of the ways that the state is working to address this issue. As you know, there is no quick fix to cybersecurity. Since the threats are a moving target, the solution has to be constantly evolving. And it is one that involves technology, process, and people. It's a three-legged stool. I'm sure many of you have heard it referred to that way. And security will fail if the three legs are not all in place. As a legislator, I'm committed to the idea that good oversight can make government more effective. New laws or new spending are not always necessary, and we should start by ensuring that our state departments are taking steps to protect their networks and holding leaders accountable for risk. Cybersecurity has been a great demonstration of that. Right after I was elected last year, I asked Speaker Tony Atkins to create a select committee on cybersecurity, and I was appointed as chair of the committee. Since then, I've also been appointed as the co-chair of the National Conference of State Legislators Task Force on Cybersecurity, and have been able to learn about the developments in other states. My select committee has held 4 hearings over the last 2 years to examine what the state is doing and what we can do better. Through discussions with our state leaders, some of whom you heard from earlier today, we've built a constructive partnership with the executive branch that I am very optimistic about. OES Director Ghilarducci and the Department of Technology's new fabulous director, Amy Tong, are bringing a sense of urgency and commitment to the issue. Through this partnership, we took some important steps to improving California's cybersecurity posture in the legislative session that just ended. In addition to Governor Brown's executive order, which created the Cal CSIC, 3 of my bills were signed into law. AB 670 requires independent security assessment of 35 state departments each year, which will help reveal and mitigate vulnerabilities before an adversary does. Over the next few years, these assessments will help centralize risk management in state government. AB 1884, which Governor Brown signed last week, requires cybersecurity incident response plans to be included in the technology recovery plans of each state agency. This planning ensures a coordinated response to a cyber event which will reduce damage, costs, and time to recovery. Lastly, AB 2623, which was also signed into law last week, requires state departments to report their spending on cybersecurity. This will help determine whether or not current spending is sufficient or effective. Most importantly, it will ensure that cybersecurity is going to be considered in all budget deliberations. While we're never going to be able to stop every threat, we can build resiliency with these policies by identifying and reducing vulnerabilities and preparing response plans that minimize damage. We can also look at how we are budgeting for security and make sure that our spending each year is effectively targeted. Resiliency is the key. While some cyber events could be truly catastrophic, the vast majority are minor, and it's important to study the differences and have public policy that reflects that. These are important questions at the heart of this issue, and inevitably the legislature will have a role in these conversations. In order to inform these policy and governance questions, we must build trust and working relationships with government, within government, and with private sector partners, which is a real reason to applaud this symposium. Looking forward, we need to consider what is a reasonable level of security, what level of protection should be legally required of companies that store your data, and obviously that question will continue to evolve as our technology does. We must also consider the value of personal information and the economy that is built around it. Unless we are looking forward-looking about such policies, many issues related to cybersecurity will be worked out in the courts, which is really in no one's best interest. This year we saw heated debates over encrypted data and phones. Encryption is essential for protecting any internet-connected device, which is the backbone of the future economy. We need to give law enforcement modern public safety tools, and I believe with good policy we can improve both security and personal privacy. Information sharing is another important issue. Where there is one vulnerability, there are likely many. And one fix that is discoverable needs to be shared and applied ubiquitously. The federal government and now the state government collect information about cyber threats that is very valuable to state and county officials, law enforcement, and local businesses. While CalCSIC is doing ambitious work in this area, sharing the information rapidly and reliably is something we need to improve upon. Incentives and liability protections may help accelerate these practices. We must also find ways to support local governments and small businesses, which have been proven to be attractive targets for bad actors. Security innovations and services need to be readily available for the interests of the public, and trust needs to be fostered in the vendor community. Cyber insurance needs to be considered not only as a way to limit catastrophic risks, but also to indirectly enforce standards and accepted best practices. We need to promote policies that enable these developments in order to keep pace with the threat landscape. I intend to continue to work on cybersecurity and make it a priority of mine as long as I have the privilege to do so. Cybersecurity will certainly be an issue that isn't going to go away anytime soon, and California has every reason in the world to lead on this issue. Lastly, I want to emphasize the tremendous workforce and economic opportunity that's obviously reflected in this room. There is no shortage of reports showing the scarcity of cybersecurity professionals and the growing demand. These are high-paying, quality jobs that should be based right here in California. Our universities need to meet that challenge, and our young people need to see this as a calling. Educating a technically skilled and aware generation is perhaps the most meaningful way to improve security. All these goals are served by promoting public-private partnerships and elevating the conversation about cybersecurity. So thank you again for inviting me to address you today, and I hope the rest of the seminar is very productive. Thank you.